Today's Gemara is Daf Yevamos Daf Lamed Aleph. We will begin by the Mishnah Daf Lamed Amud Beis. Mishnah begins v'chulam. So it's very simple Mishnah. We already discussed the very first Mishnah. You heard it a lot of times that if a person is married to his wife and an erva to his brother, and then the person dies. For example, in my case over here, we have Shimon married to the daughter of his brother Ruvain, plus he's also married to Miriam, another wife. If Shimon dies, of course, Ruvain cannot do Yibum to his daughter and to his the co-wife over here, Miriam. But what happens if our Mishnah is dealing with if he didn't do kedushin with the with the erva? He only did a suffix kedushin. He's not sure if he's married to the erva. Now, how's that possible? The Mishnah is going to discuss that. In that case, when he dies, so he was only suffix married to the erva, and this could be any erva, not just his daughter. It could be Baspita or all the 15 ervas. So then Ruvain will need to do chalitza on the co-wife. The chalitza on the co-wife because he was only besuffic married to the erva. What happens? We know for sure if he was married to the erva. Let's say we know for sure he was married to the erva, but then subsequently he gave a get, but he wasn't sure if he gave a get. Now, how is that possible? You give a get and it's a suffix get, not a kosher get, or maybe it's a half a kosher get. So then possibly when he died, then he wasn't really married to the erva. In that case, also the Mishnah will say you do chalitza. That's it. And the Mishnah is going to discuss v'kulam. In all these cases, all the ervas, shahib and kedushin or gerushin besafik, if they had a kedushin or a gerushin or a divorce besafik, so you don't know if they're married to the erva or not. Harei elu hatzore. So the co-wife is holtzis v'lo misyabamos. So the co-wife gets chalitza and does not get yibam. So the Mishnah explains what's an example of ketzat suffix kedushin. What is called a suffix kedushin on the erva? So the Mishnah says zarak la kedushin. You threw to this co-wife, to this erva, a kedushin, and she was standing in the reshus harabim. Suffix harav law. We're not sure. The suffix is that the kedushin. Let's say he threw a quarter, right, or a ring to her. And it's within her dalat amas, or suffix to his dalat amas, or suffix of law. Maybe it got into her dalat amas. We're not sure if it landed close enough to her where she could be kind of everything that's within her dalat amas. Person's kind of he takes possession of something that lands within his dalat amas in reshus harabim. But the Eidim are not sure when he threw the kedushin to her. Did it land close enough to her so it's as if she received it and she was mekabel kedushin, or did she not? He didn't throw it so far. Zahu suffix kedushin. That is called a suffix kedushin. Again, a suffix kedushin is to suffix kedushin to the erva, and therefore the tzara, the co-wife, would only get chalitza, not yibam, and she wouldn't go free. Suffix gerushin, but what's a suffix of gerushin? Now, the Mishnah could have easily said that you threw a get to her, and we're not sure if it landed within her dalat amas or not within her dalat amas. But the Mishnah doesn't choose that. The Mishnah gives you another example. If a person wrote a get and handed it to her, but it was in his handwriting, vein all of Edim, and there's no Edim on it. So midoraisa, it's a good get because he wrote it in his handwriting. What's wrong? But the Rabbanon required Edom on the get, and therefore it's a suffix gerushin. Yeshel, or another example, Yeshel of Edom, it has Edom on it. Bein bais man, it doesn't have the time on it. It doesn't have the correct date on the get. So that's also possible midrabanan. The Raisa, it's a kosher get. Yesh bais man bein bayala eid echad. If it has man and it only has eid echad, if it only has one eid, so instead of it's almost kosher. It has the date, but it only has one witness. Zahu suffix gerushin. This is a gerushin that only works midaraisa, midarabanan. It's not a good gerushin. Because of that, if the erva had such a type of gerushin, then the co-wife cannot walk free. She gets chalitza and not yibam. So both in the suffix kedushin and the suffix gerushin, the co-wife does not walk free. She gets chalitza, not yibam. So the Gemara is going to deal with the first question, which is the obvious question. Why did the Mishnah choose a different case of a Safek Gerushin than Safek Kedushin. It could have easily said that the Gerushin, Safek Gerushin was if he threw it to her, and we don't know if the Gerushin landed in close to her or did not land close to her. Just the same way that you said Safek Kedushin is if you threw the Kedushin, Safek Karav Law, Safek Karav Law. So that's the Gemara's question. And the Gemara is going to give three answers. But basically, the first answer is Rabba's answer. And we'll deal with that. The ilu begerushin safek karav law loikatana. It doesn't give that example by gerushin of a case where it's safek close to him or safek close to her. It doesn't say that example. It uses a different example. So the Gemara says ma'atama. What is the reason for that? Omar Rabba said isha zu becheskes heta l'shukay medes. Rabba is going to say a fascinating thing. He says that if in case he threw a safek karav law type of gerushin to his wife, to the erva, then the tzara would go free in that case. She would not be required chalitza. We'd ask her to leave if she could go free, because if we do give her chalitza, it could lead to problems. So first Rabbi explains himself. The woman would go free because ishazu becheskes hetel l'shukay medes. When in this case we know for sure they're married to Rachel. We know for sure that he's married to the erva. So this Miriam is for sure has a chazaka that she's supposed to go free without a chalitza or a yibam. Now, in this case, Safek atabol la'oisroi, and because of this Safek gerushin, you want to say no, she needs a chalitza. Al ta'asrenu misafek. Don't answer her because of your doubt. You just go back to the chazaka that she could go free without a chalitza or yibam. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye challenged that ihachi. If that's so, by kedushin nami name it. By kedushin, we should say the same idea. Isa zu becheskes hatel yabam medes. The tzara, the co-wife, had a chazaka that she was permitted to marry the yabam because we don't know if he was if Shimon is actually married to the erva or not. And now with the Safek Kedushin, you want to say that we don't know if she's married to the. If we don't know, we won't. If he's married to the erva, and because of that, you want to say that on the chance that he's married to the erva, the tzara is not permitted to have yibam. Al ta'asrenu misafek. Don't answer her from safek, and therefore let her be able to have yibam. Why does she have to have chalitza? She could be able to have yibam. Answer the Gemara: yes, technically she could have yibam. Hasam l'chumra. We go l'chumra and tell her that no, that l'chumra you should have chalitza. But technically, in this case, the chazaka. Let's go with the default. The default is that she should be able to have yibam with Ruben. We only tell her to do chalitza because of a chumrah. So the Gemara is going to ask a question, but by doing so, you're leading to another problem. If you're going to, it's going to lead to a leniency. Because the fact is that because you're requiring her to have chalitza, it's only because you're going to. Only because you're going to assume that the kedushin actually worked. Zimnan, but it could come out l'dei kula, a tremendous leniency here, because people are going to assume that the kedushin that you gave Safek Karav Law worked, and it's a good kedushin to the erva. And Zimnan also who mekadesh lo achoisa la kedushay vadai. He's going to, let's say, for a joke, try to mekadesh the sister of the erva. A kedusha vade. He's going to give her for sure kedusha, and everybody's going to say no. That kedusha is totally not worthless because you're married to the erva, right? If you and really, it's only a suffix kedusha to the erva, and it's only a suffix kedusha to the erva by you giving a kedusha to the sister of the erva. You actually suffix married to to the sister of the erva. And if people are going to say no, people are going to come to the conclusion that no, you were for sure married to the erva, and the sister of the erva, the kedushin did not work. They're going to allow the sister of the erva to walk free without anything. Inami, another possibility that something could go wrong. Again, you're going to assume by requiring a chalitza, people are going to assume that the safek kedushin to the erva worked, and therefore, what could be the problem? The zimnan da asa acher mekadosh lo nidah kedusha vade. Let's say somebody's going to go over to the erva, give her a kedusha vade, and we're going to assume, oh no, that's not going to work at all, because v'kevin da asa lo mal tzor la yabum. Since you're going to require, you're going to asa the co-wife from having yibum. Amre, people are going to say that really because she's married to people are going to assume that she's married to the first person, to the person that gave the Safek Kedushin and the Kama Kedushin. People are going to assume automatically it's a for sure Kedushin what the person gave her, the first person that gave her the Safek Kedushin worked, is 100% effective. The fact is that you're requiring this Tzara Chalitza, the Basra Lav Kedushin, and assume that whatever he did second is not a Kedushin. But people are not going to come to the conclusion that the first one is a suffix and the second one that is going to happen to be a suffix. So if he went and was Makadash's sister, he's not going to assume that the fact that he gave Kedushin to the sister, it is effective, because he'll always assume that I was married to the Erva and the sister of the Erva, the Kedushin doesn't work. Or if a stranger come and was Makadesh the Erva, he's going to walk away and says, I wasn't Makadesh her, and I'm not married to her. I'm not also her relative, but possibly you are. Maybe the first Kedushin is not a good Kedushin and yours is a good Kedushin. So all these problems could come up by requiring Chalitza in a case of Safek Karav Law and Safek Karav Law. So the Gemara says, no, that's not true. Why? Since you require Chalitza and you don't allow Yibam, so people are going to know, everybody's going to know that it's a chumrah, because people know the fact that you don't allow Ruvain to do chalitza, to do yibam with Miriam. They're only saying chalitza, chalitza, chalitza. People will say, why not? Elamai, he wasn't married to Rachel. So the answer is, people say that no, possibly he was married to Rachel, and therefore it's a suffix. Everybody will know it was a suffix, and everything that comes as a result of the suffix, another derivative of that suffix, would also be a problem of a suffix, and everybody will know it's a chumrah, and that's what. So that's why in the case of Safek Kedushin, it's good to say cholzes v'layipsiamis. No mishap can happen from that. But Safek Gerushin, the Gemara now assumes that if you had a case of Safek Karav Law, then it would also a mishap can happen. A mishap can happen, and that's why she goes free without any chalitza or yibam. Now the Gemara asks, why not? Why don't you require, again, if you have the same case by Gerushin, by Safek Karav Law, require Chalitza. Nothing bad can happen for that, and everybody will know that it's a Chumrah. So the Gemara says, if you're going to say Chalitza, people say Misyabemis, then why not do Yibam? And if you do Yibam, wait a second, you're doing Yibam with an Eishes Ach, a possible Eishes Ach. So the Gemara says, Hachanami. If you're going to say Chalitza, then people say you're doing Yibam. So the Gemara says, by Kedushin, there's no problem if you do Yibam. Because what is the worst that can happen? That you did Yibam. But it will not go against the original Chazaka. But the Siyabim, the Ein Bekachlum, let her have Yibam. You go after the first chazaka, and the first default is that she was permitted to marry the Yabam. So in conclusion, what the Gemara is saying like this: if there's a suffix kedushin to the erva, then the default always is that the chazaka is that he's permitted to do Yibam with Miriam, because that's the default. It's only you want to bring in a possible suffix that he's not allowed to do Yibam. So if the Eved, he does Yibam, because people say, oh, Chalitza, maybe he can do Yibam too. So then if he does Yibam, it's no problem because he's going with the Chazaka. But by Gerushin, what is the Chazaka? The Chazaka is that Miriam is not permitted to Reuven because he was for sure married to the Erva. No, you want to say that there was a Safek Gerushin over here. Okay, with a Safek Gerushin, if he would indeed marry Miriam, he will be going against the chazaka, because the chazaka, the default is that he was married to the erva, and therefore he was not permitted. Reuven is not permitted to marry Miriam. He's marrying an Eishes Ach. That's why by Yibam, by the Safek Gerushin, if it was a Safek Karav law, we would not allow a chalitza, because a mistake can happen. People will say Yibam. But by Kedushin, even if we say chalitza because of a chumrah, even if they ended up doing Yibam, it's not going to be such a problem. Eisvei Abaya asked the question, but you do see by not Gerushin, but similar to Gerushin, where the chazaka would tell you that you're not permitted to do Yibam. And that's the chazaka. And we do require chalitza, and we don't be geyser, we don't make gezeres that once you say chalitza, you're going to do Yibam. Similar case. A man was married to an erva, let's say his niece, and to a co-wife. But nafal abayis olav al beis bas achiv. All of a sudden, the house collapsed on him and his wife, the bas achiv, which is the erva. Now, the question is, if he died first, then there's no yibam chalitza here. But if the erva died first in the collapse and then he died, well, if the erva died first, then there would be yibam chalitza because she died, the erva is not here, and the one that's falling to yibam chalitza, the co-wife who survived, could technically have yibam chalitza. And the Mishnah says, "Ve'eni du eis mehem eis rishon." We don't know who died first. Did he die first, and then nobody falls to chalitza or yibam, or maybe the erva died first, the bas achiv died first, and the tzara does fall to yibam or chalitza. So chumrah, we say tzara chaletzis v'lo misiabemis. The chumrah is that we say that tzara needs chalitza and not yibam. What's the default over here? That the tzara is not permitted to do yibam, and that's the default. So the Gemara says, "Amai." She's supposed to go to the street without yibim or chalitza. That is her chazaka. That's her default, because she's an Eishes Ach. Because you want to say perhaps the erba died first, and therefore she's required. She fell to yibam. Al ta'asren misafek. So v'chi tema. Are you going to say that we require chalitza hachanami lechumra? We're requiring chalitza lechumra. Chumra dasale kulahu. Shima atay mechaletzes misiabem. If you're going to say that you allow her to have chalitza, she's going to automatically get yibam. So again, why don't we say over there, just like we said over here in our case, that had Gerushin been in Safek Karv law, if you require chalitza, you might do yibam. So in that case also, if you're going to require chalitza, you might do yibam. And you're going against the default. The default is that there's an issa to do yibam over here. It's a cheskes heter l'shuk. She's supposed to go free. And for the Gemara, right, really, you shouldn't require anything over there. But I don't make the gzeira of if you're going to do chalitza, you're going to do yibam. Only by gerushin I make that gzeira, by the safek gerushin. Gerushin, the shchikri, gerushin, it's a common case that I don't know why it's called such a common case, that people could throw a safek karav law, the shchicha, it's more possible. Gazruhu baraban, the Brahman made a gzera that if you're going to say chalitza, you might do yibam. That's why by gerushin they said let her go free with nothing. Mapoilis, a collapsed building, and you don't know who died first, the erva or the husband. The loy shchichi, that's not so common. Loy does a rabbanon, the rabbanon didn't make an gzera, and they said chumra, you could put chalitza. It could lead to yibam. That case doesn't come up so often, so therefore they didn't make a gzera. If you're going to say chalitza, you might do yibam. The Gemara says, wait a second. Inami, another scenario. I'm sorry, another teretz. Gerushin the kaime erva the komoicha v'tzor komatza chlei chalitza amre kamer be'rabbanon the gitim b'mal yehu. In other words, gerushin. Here you're dealing with the erva survived, the erva is around, and the co-wife is around. And people are going to say, why are you requiring the co-wife a chalitza? Because he was married to the erva. And therefore, you might come to do yibam to the co-wife. So that makes perfect sense. Mapoilis, everybody is going to know that if you're requiring a in my pilus, if you're requiring chalitza to the co-wife, people are not going to assume that the Rabbanan knew for sure what happened, because in a collapsed building, you don't know who died first. Me come a Rabbanan pilus. Will the Rabbanan know who died first in a pilus? People are going to assume by a collapsed building, even the Rabbanan did not know who died first, and the chalitza is only a chumrah. So therefore, this type of chalitza, they're not going to say, "Oh, you could have done yibum," but by get, it's possible people will come to erroneous belief that the Rabbanan knew that the Safek Harav Law case is a case where it's a Vade get. And it's a Vade get. That's why she's up for Chalitza, but technically she could have been up to Yibam. That's why the mistake could happen by the case of Safek Harav Law. Therefore, by Safek Harav Law, there's no Chalitza, no Yibam. And by a collapsed building, it's not a problem saying that the co-wife is required to have chalitza. So the Gemara asks the question, by Gerishin, and there's a Gemara that says that you do need chalitza by Gerishin. Not what Rabba's opinion. There's actually a Mishnah that seems to say that. Well, tonight we learned in the Mishnah, person was standing Rosh Hashanah and threw a get to his wife. Karav law, if it's close to her, Megureshes, she becomes Megureshes. Karav law, if it's close to him, it didn't land in her Dalat Amas. Ain't Megureshes, it's not Megureshes. Mechatza, Mechza, it landed on the dotted line, assuming that they're standing 8 Amas apart. And it landed right in the middle, Megureshes, Megureshes. Then she's a Suffolk Gerushim. So what's the nafkamina? What halacha do you learn from that she's a Safek Gerushin? So the Gemara answers, the kohen who, if he is a kohen asira le, that means he's not permitted to remarry her, because we can assume that maybe the Gerushin is a good, and the kohen is not allowed to marry a grusha. The erva who, and if she's an erva, and so we don't know if there was a Gerushin over here, so tzarasa by chalitza, then the tzara does need chalitza. So this is the case of Safek Harav Law, and the Gemara in Masechta Gittin says that in that case you would need a chalitza. And you don't say that, oh, maybe if you allow chalitza, she's going to do yibam. And you don't say that. So how did Rabbah draw the conclusion from our Mishnah that a Safek Harav Law, the co-wife would not need a chalitza, and the way we draw the conclusion in the same Mishnah in Masechta Gittin, we draw the conclusion by the Safek Harav Law situation that the co-wife wouldn't require chalitza. And for the Gemara, so the first Gemara tries to say that way. The Gemara is going to try to say that there's a difference between the Safek Harav Law in our Mishnah and in that Mishnah. In the case in Gittin, what made it a doubt? There are 2 sets of Edim, 2 against verses 2. Achas emeres Karav Law, Achas emeres Karav Law. Have a Sveka Daraisa. There, it's a Safek Daraisa. So there were 2 Edim. Each one contradicted each other. One said it landed close to her, and one pair of Edim, a set of Edim, landed close to him. Well, 2 Edim have a power midaraisa to say Edis. And therefore, if you have 2 versus 2, it's a Safek Daraisa. And that's why the Mishnah over there says you do Chalitza. In our Mishnah, since we're dealing with one aid said one direction and one aid said another direction, but each by themselves don't have the power of the derisive type of derisive power of an aidis. They're only aidis midrabanan. The Havale spake their Rabbanan, because they're said have their Rabbanan. Therefore, the Rabbanan said you don't even need chalitza. So the Gemara says, how do you know? How do you know our Mishnah would be talking about a scenario where there's 1 versus 1? How do you know our Mishnah is dealing with a one type of aid versus a one type of aid? Answers the Gemara, Dumi to Kedushin. Our Mishnah juxtaposes the case of Gerushin to the case of Kedushin. And the case of Kedushin was talking about one versus 1. Ma Kedushin Mekat Achas, Av Gerushin Mekat Achas. Just like Kedushin was dealing with one pair, 1 versus 1, Av Gerushin was dealing with 1 versus 1. So the Gemara says, wait a second, maybe, how do you know by Kedushin is dealing with 1 versus 1? Maybe it's dealing with 2 pairs of Eidim. So the Gemara says, If the case of kedushin was he was mekadesh the erva, and there's two sets of edim, each one contradicting each other. Whether the kedushin land karav law tisyabem, saying that you go according to the chazaka, you could do yibum with the co-wife the ein bekach klum, because that's the chazaka. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Kaime edim bekamrele karav law v'at ama tisyabem ein bekach klum. That you say that the Edom are saying there's another powerful Edom saying that it was close to her and that he was Mekadesh, the Erva. And you're going to say that you do Yibam to the co-wife and there's no problem because the Chazaka, but you have a set of Edom, which is a derisive type of power Edom according to your version. And you're saying that, that you should be able to do Yibam and there wouldn't, no problem with that. So the Gemara is saying, then the Gemara said, V'su, another point I'm going to bring out. With you have two sets of Edom, it's also a problem, the Rabbanim. Why? The Amre, because the Eiker Trey Labad Trey, you're calling it the Raisa, but still you have 2 versus 2. And the Isha Oikma Chazaka, you should always go after the Chazaka for the woman. And it doesn't make sense to say that there should be a difference whether the suffix karv law was testified by 2 pairs of Edom versus 1 pair of Edom. You always go after the chazaka. If you have nechosim of the bar shatya, let's say a guy who sometimes is a person that prone to go insane and then comes back to be normal. Gemara says a story. There was somebody who insane who sold his property. Also, there were 2 witnesses and said, he sold it when he was normal. And 2 witnesses testified that he was in an insane moment when he sold it. So he wasn't himself. Rashi says, let's put the 2 versus the 2. We go on a base, and we consider the land back to the owner of the person who was prone to the chazaka was he did not sell it. So therefore, you always go after the chazaka. So we're back to square one, and we're proving that our Mishnah had it captured the case of Suffolk Karav law, we're saying that in that case, also you would be required to have chalitza and not yibam. And that's the way we're learning pshat. Seems to be an open Mishnah in Masechta Gittin that said that if in case of Suffolk Karav law, you would be required to have chalitza, not yibam. So the question reverts back: why did our Mishnah on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph? Why did our Mishnah say by kedushin it gives you a case of Suffolk Karav law, and by gerushin it gives you a totally different new case? So we just knocked away Rabbah, the first attempt to answer that question, and we're going to give the bottom line answer. Really, the bottom line answer: both of them work. Just give you some different examples by Suffolk Kedushin and by Suffolk Gerushin, and the Suffolk that exists by Gerushin could exist by Kedushin. For example, and this, if you wrote a Kedushin without Zman, let's say, or the examples that you give by Suffolk Kedushin could apply by Suffolk Gerushin. The Mishnah wanted to be a little bit more colorful, but technically it could have chosen the Suffolk Karav law by Gerushin, and you would be required chalitza, and she wouldn't go free without anything. Elomar Abai said, Yagid Olav Raider. Tana Bekadushin V'odin Legerushin. Tana Begerushin V'odin Lekadushin. Everything tells the friend can tell you about it. In other words, it gives you examples by Kedushin, but those examples could apply by Gerushin. The Suffolk Karav law could apply by Gerushin as well. Tana Begerushin, all the cases that it gave you by Gerushin, V'odin Lekadushin. Amalei Abai, Rava said, Yagid Olav Raider Mahozeh Diktanim. It says Zehu Diktana means that these are the only cases by Kedushin that you could have a case of Suffolk, that you could have a Suffolk Kedushin. This is the only case by Gerushin that can be a Suffolk Gerushin. The Mishnah says this is the only case. So you can't say that both cases apply to each other. Ella Amar Rava says like this: Kol sheyesh b'kedushin yesh b'gerushin. True. Whatever the Suffolk Carve law case, which is by kedushin, could apply by gerushin. Yesh b'gerushin, but some cases by gerushin, Mashain came by kedushin, would not apply by kedushin. In other words, it would be a badai kedushin. Those cases that you considered a Suffolk gerushin would be a badai kedushin. And zeru the gerushin lavdafka. When it says these cases only apply by gerushin, it doesn't mean so. It could that means this is when it says sepik. This is by gerushin. This is the only possible cases by gerushin that you could have a suffix. That's not definitive, because the cases by kedushin could apply by gerushin. The gerushin lavdafka elo mishum the tonu zehu bekedushin tonu nam zehu begerushin. You see, by the zehu that's by gerushin, it doesn't mean that this is only a Suffolk gerushin, but Suffolk carve law is not a Suffolk gerushin. That could also apply by gerushin. But the zehu the kedushin, that's already that's dafka, because most of the things by gerushin, some of the things by gerushin would not apply by kedushin. So which of the sveikas that we said in the Mishnah that was a Suffolk gerushin would not apply by kedushin, and by kedushin we would consider it a levade. The kedushin lemutei mai. What is that trying to exclude? So the Gemara says lemutei zman, and this will take us to the Mishnah, and that if you forgot to write the zman by kedushin, that would still be a good kedushin. The lake could be kedushin. So the Gemara says, and we know a kedushin, you could be mekadosh nisha with a star. So the Gemara asks, why didn't they require you to put a date in a kedushin star? So the Gemara says it wouldn't. There's no reason to do so. So the Gemara says like this: Hanicha, it makes sense that you don't need to put zman by kedushin. If you hold the reason why you put zman by eris and mishum peri, because the Baal eats some of the possessions of his wife. He has the right to some of the fruits of the properties that she brought into the marriage. So therefore, he's going to always try to delay the zman of the gerushin, the get, in order to justify why he was still eating the fruits of the property even after he was gerushin. If they're going to bring him to court, he'll say no. The gerushin, you think the gerushin happened earlier? It happened much later than you think, and I had a right to eat that peri. But that only applies if they were married. But by kedushin, arusa laspa peri. Somebody who's just engaged to his wife through kedushin doesn't get peris. So therefore, there's no reason to write the date by a kedushin star. But according to the opinion that says that the reason why you write a date in a get, because it used to be that a person was married to his niece, and in order to and if his niece did znus, he's going to try to erase, and when his niece did znus, then she's ashes ish, and she was required to be put to death. So in order to protect her, he's going to backdate the date on the get and say, no, I gave her a get prior to that, and she was not an ashes ish when she did znus, and therefore you're not supposed to kill her. And so even though he's trying to divorce her, he's still going to protect his former wife. And so therefore, according to that case, liskin zman, let us require a date on a get, because we could have the same problem over here. He's going to give kedushin to his niece, and then we'll find out that she did znus, and he'll say, no, he'll post-date it. No, she did znus before I got engaged to her, and therefore there's no misa over here. She wasn't an ashes ish. And so therefore, the Gemara says, if you hold the reason why you put zman on a get is because he's trying to protect his wife or former wife from being killed, so therefore that reason should apply whether you're doing gerushin, which we require date, so it should also be required when you did kedushin. And says the Gemara, the reason why we didn't require a date on a kedushin star is mishum the kedushin ikin mekadosh bekaspa, ikin mekadosh shtara loytik and rabbanim zman. Some people give kedushin with money, and some people give kedushin to a star. So therefore, not everybody does a star. and therefore the Rabbanan didn't require a date. But Gittin, everybody does the only way to divorce your wife is with a shtar, and therefore there was a requirement to have a date on that shtar. Amalei Rav Acha Rabbi Yosef Rav Ashi, he asked the question to Rav Ashi, that's not a good answer. Well, the date on a get shichra for a slave, sometimes a slave could go free by redeeming himself. Sometimes he goes free by the shtar, where the shtar allows him to go free. Utik Rabbanim's man, and the Rabbanim required a date on the shtar shichra, the shtar of the freedom. So the Gemara says, Hasam ruba b'shtara. By the slave, everybody divorces wants to free a slave will use a shtar. Very few people will have the eved. I don't know how he's going to have money to be able to redeem himself. Hacha over here, ruba b'kaspa. Most of the people that are makadosh and isha do it with money, and therefore, since most people do it with money, only a minority does kedusha with a shtar. And therefore, the Rabbanan did not require a shtar by kedusha. It's not possible. Why? Because what are we going to do over here? We were going to put the shtar. We were going to put the shtar kedushin. How are we going to trust the zman on a shtar kedushin? If we're going to leave the shtar kedushin by her, machakala, she's going to erase it. She's going to erase it to protect herself. She's going to post-date the Zman. If they catch her ding znus after she got to Kedushin, they'll say, we're going to put you to death because we know that you got Kedushin. And she can say, look at my Kedushin star. It's a later date. I was a pnuya. I wasn't married. I wasn't engaged when I did this znus. She's going to erase it. So we don't trust it if we leave it by her. Let's leave it by the man, the star Kedushin. He's going to also try to protect her, because if he's engaged to his niece, he's going to try to protect her from being put to death. Let's leave it by the Eidim, Ishtar Kedushin, if they're going to remember the Zman. So we don't need to have a Zman. They'll say, I know when she got engaged. I remember the date. I looked at my calendar, and that was the date I signed on the star. If they don't remember the date that they got engaged, that they signed on the star, so then, if the Zimin the Chazim Miksav, they're going to reread the shtar and look at the Zman on the shtar, and that's how they're going to remind themselves what the Zman of the shtar was. And then they come to say, they have to know it by heart, the Zman, and not read it and have something remind them what the Zman was. So we have no place where to leave the shtar kedushin. So it doesn't make sense to require a date by kedusha. So the Gemara asked the obvious question: let's say by gerushin also, she's going to change. If you leave the gerushin by her, she's also going to erase it. And so, what do you trust that you need zman by gerushin? She's going to erase it to protect herself, or he's going to erase it, and you can't leave it by the Adam either. So Gemara says, Hassam over there. The Gemara answers, Hassam over there by Gerushin, by Hassam over there, by Kedushin, Lahatzala Dida Ka'ase. It's the erasing is coming to save her, because we're not going to say that maybe she erased it, because if Adam came and said, you did znus on such and such a date, if she doesn't bring the get, if she doesn't bring Bahasam over there, if she doesn't bring the get prior to that she got prior to the date, then let me backtrack. The Greek Hasam by getting. Hasa means by getting. We're trying to save her. And so we're not afraid that maybe she erased it. Because when Adam come and say that she did znus, if she doesn't bring the shtar that she got a get before that, so we're going to always assume she's a cheskas eishes ish. So therefore, no. I am saying it wrong. Ihachi. Begerishin name in the hachi. So the Gemara says, Hasan by Kedushin, I had it right. We're coming to save her. That means we're trying to save her. So we're not afraid that my apologies, I got distracted during this recording. So, but I just want to give the teretz over here. The question is, let's read the Rashi. The question is, by Gerushin, by Gittin, why did they put his man by the get? Who are we going to leave the get and trust that the date is true? So the Gemara says over there, over there by Gerushin, we're trying to save her. We're not worried that she's going to erase it. Adam come and told her that she did znus. If she's not going to take out the get and say, if she's not going to take out the get that she got Gerushin before that, we're going to kill her because she was a cheskes eishes. So umiu Eli tikkun rabbanim's mom. So she's always going to be in motivated to raise the zman and the get. But yet if the rabbanim did not require zman beget, have a matzah lapuke law umisveka loy katlina law, then she could always deny it and say, no, I had the gerushin before. We wouldn't kill her. But now the onus to prove herself is on her. If she's not going to bring it, we're going to kill her. Because again, when she brings an erased zman, we look at it and say, hey, there's a whiteout over here. So therefore, it's hard for her to erase it and be trusted. That's why by getting it makes more sense to require a zman by get. But hacham, the default is that she wasn't married. She's trying to say it's if she erases it, it goes against her. It makes her guilty. Zman the kedushin. The zman makes her guilty. The tekken rabbanon zman b'zinsa. If the rabbanon was masakin zman and then she zuns kaf shalosh shtara oy machkale, she'll just deny the star. That she'll say, I never got a kedushin. I was never married. Did you ever see me living with him? She'll erase it. And then we'll put her on the chazaka of that she was not married, and therefore we wouldn't kill her. So again, it depends what the chazaka is. If the chazaka is echeskas eishes ish, so then we can put zman, and then the onus is to prove herself that she's not an eishes ish. But if the chazaka is that she can revert to the chazaka pnuya, then the zman is not going to do anything because she's going to hide the whole star and go back to cheskes pnuya if she sees that we're going to come to kill her because of this nus. That's why there is no zman get. So in summary, basically we had the Mishnah of this Mishnah of Safek Kedushin. If you gave a Safek Kedushin to the Erva, a Safek Gerushin to the Erva, the Gemara initially tried to say that the Safek Karav law case would not apply by Gerushin. She would in that case go out free completely. And then the Gemara says, no, that they do apply. Safek Kedushin applies by Gerushin. Safek Gerushin, all the cases by Safek Gerushin apply by Kedushin. But one of the cases does not apply by Kedushin, and that is the case of Yeshal of Edom Ein Baisman, which that would make a Pasala Gerushin, but by Kedushin, there was no in of putting Zman on a star Kedushin. Okay. Sorry for the interruption over here. Have a great day.